Thank you so much, Peggy. I'll definitely take it away. We're so glad to have you all here at our event tonight and wanted to start with a couple of key terms that we could really center around our discussion, the key terms that are really good for folks to know as far as the LGBTQIA community, but will be really useful in our discussion today. And I believe my colleague, Chris, is going to drop in a link in the chat in just a moment. The terms that we're using are from the UCDavis LGBTQIA Resource Center. It's a really great resource for this discussion. If there's a word or a term that you don't know, that you're unfamiliar with, this is a really great Rolodex that you can sort of use to learn as you go and think about these as you go. But there are a couple that I wanted to highlight that were going to be pretty key to this discussion. One is cisgender, which is a gender identity or performance in a gender role that society deems to match the person's assigned sex at birth. A lot of times we will say, we may not say cisgender, but we may say cis man or cis women. And it's a term used to highlight the privilege of folks who are not transgender. When we are looking at the term transgender, and I'll try to go through these quickly because I know that you all can also read through the resources that I provided. Transgender, an adjective used most often as an umbrella term and frequently abbreviated to trans. Identifying as transgender, as trans, means that one's internal knowledge of gender is different from conventional or cultural expectations based on the sex that person was assigned at birth. When we think about folks who identify as transgender, those who identify as non-binary or gender non-conforming may also identify under the transgender umbrella. A drag queen, a person, often a man who appears as a woman, generally in reference to an act or performance. This has no implications regarding gender identity. Gender identity, a sense of oneself as trans, genderqueer, woman, man, or some other identity, which may not correspond with the sex and gender one is assigned at birth. LGBTQIA+, an abbreviation for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, and asexual. The plus is also added to refer to the community as a whole. There are many other folks who fall under the LGBTQIA umbrella. If you want more information, I would definitely go in and look under this term for a more expanded definition. Non-binary, a gender identity and experience that embraces a full universe of expressions and ways of being that resonate for an individual, moving beyond the male and female gender binary. And the last term I wanted to add here is, what is a toxic product? Toxic products contain substances like chemicals that can be harmful to a person's health, often depending on the dose. And we'll talk a little bit more about toxic products in just a moment. We fortunately have a really great expert here on toxic products and personal care products. So really excited to move in this direction of introducing our panelists. So I'm going to start introducing our panelists really briefly, just so we can get more of a sense of who they are, and then I'll let them introduce themselves in just a moment. One moment, lost my notes. Great. All right, first we have Dr. Ami Zota, who's an associate professor in the Department of Environmental and Occupational Health at George Washington University, Milken School of Public Health. Next, we have Jahlove Serrano, a health educator, AIDS activist, a youth advocate, background dancer, choreographer, androgynous model, and drag queen. We also have King Ivy, a healer, spiritualist, creator, image consultant, and drag queen. King Ivy also is a makeup artist by day. And Roqué. Roqué is also a drag artist, lives in the Bronx, and will tell us a lot more about her story in just a moment, and is also very connected to some of our WEAC community members here. So I would love to start with you, Dr. Zota. If you could tell us a little bit more about how you got into research around personal care products, how your work connects to personal care products, and give us a little bit more of an landscape view of what personal care product research looks like.
Thank you, Taylor. Thank you for the introduction and for taking the lead on organizing this event. I speak around the country on these issues, and to my knowledge, this is really the first event that's centering and highlighting the voices of the LGBTQIA community and gender and sexual minorities. So just want to give the props to WEACT for always being on the forefront of these issues. So with that, what I'm going to do is just kind of give just a few slides to help frame our conversation. And I just want to say I may be the expert in some of these chemicals and their health effects, but I'm here to learn from all of you. Really see this as a bi-directional learning experience. So okay, let me just try to do this, and then. Okay, do you see full screen, Taylor? Does that, okay. All right, so I'm just gonna give you kind of, this is really just meant to be a little bit of primer on toxic chemicals in cosmetics. Just because I know for some of you, you're new to this discussion. This is a headline, from 2 weeks ago. There was a new study out really showing how these PFAS chemicals that we've been hearing a lot about, they're the forever chemicals in our drinking water. Well, they're also really widespread in our cosmetics. So, really just to kind of point out, this is a big widespread problem, and it's in the news a lot. And, that's why I think it's important to have this conversation. Beauty products contain multiple chemicals that can harm health. Formaldehyde, it's a human carcinogen. Phthalates, we'll talk about. Parabens, lead, you've probably heard of because of paint and gasoline. It's also in cosmetics. Mercury, triclosan, as well as PFAS. So it's really a chemical soup that is in our cosmetics, in the, and our personal care products, these products that we put in and around our bodies, in our homes on a daily basis. Some of them have concerning health effects, endocrine disruption. So this is kind of that hormone mimicking activity, cancer, interferes with our ability of reproduction, right? To both to get pregnant and also to deliver healthy children. Asthma, allergy, as well as can interfere with brain development. So why? I know that one thing I love about WEAC's work, they always are focused on driving and advancing systemic change, right? And so a lot of that is about engaged advocacy and also understanding the policy landscape. And so I want to make sure people have a sense of the inadequacy of our current day policies. The laws safeguarding the health and safety of personal care products is outdated and ineffective. So FDA is the federal agency that oversees regulation of personal care products, and they lack the authority to review ingredients in these products to determine whether they are safe. So you can't assume what you find in Target or CVS has gone through some, high level scrutiny by the government, because the laws aren't set up that way. In the United States, only 11 substances are banned or restricted from use in these products, whereas hundreds of chemical substances are banned or restricted in Europe, and many more even in Canada. And as a result, U.S. companies, that make personal care products, they're largely regulating themselves. And companies really don't have to disclose all the ingredients in the product. So I just want to take you through a little bit of my research on one class of chemicals, phthalates. So the pH is silent. I know it's kind of a weird looking term. This is a class of chemicals. And they're both used to make plastic soft. but they're also added to beauty products because they help bind fragrances. We can measure the byproducts of these chemicals in our bodies, especially by looking in urine. Overwhelmingly, everybody has them. I have them in my body. You probably have them in your body. They're concerning because they disrupt hormone signaling systems, right? And, while to my knowledge, no one has looked at these associations in the trans community or even have thought about how these chemicals may, interfere with testosterone therapy or, a lot of the drugs that people are using to kind of help to become the person they want to become. There's so many research gaps. There's strong evidence of it interfering with reproduction, right? One's ability to have children, have healthy children. And in humans, phthalates are associated with increased risk of infertility, pregnancy complications, male reproductive tract development, so increasing markers of feminization in male fetuses, and are suspected to play a role in obesity and other metabolic diseases. So when we have personal care products, you may be wondering, so if it's in the product, how does it get into our body? So some products, they may come in a spray can, right? Or even nail polish. The vapors can end up in the air, volatilize, and you can breathe them in, right? So that's what happens in a nail salon. The other thing that can happen is, right, you put it on your hands and then maybe you put your hands in your mouth. Hand to mouth behavior. And then there's just absorption through the skin. So these are some of the different ways how what's in a product can end up in your body. Here's just some data from a paper I published, right? So my lab and others have looked at just who's more highly exposed. Here we find that women of color, especially Black women, have higher exposures to these beauty product related chemicals. We've also done work, which it makes sense. Okay, so you find these higher exposures, you both want to know what are the health implications, but you want to know what's driving those exposures. So my own work has found links between the types of menstrual and intimate care products that people use and their phthalates exposures. Other studies have found links with hair products, lotions, and skin creams have been linked to other problematic chemicals like mercury. So we have the data that what you're using can impact what the chemicals in your body. But most of those studies were focused on individual behaviors. And so as we have this conversation about what products people are using, how are they bad for your health, I also just want to kind of add another layer to this conversation. And that's really thinking about these upstream societal norms. What are the influences around the products we use, what we define as beautiful, socially acceptable, right? These are highly racialized, right? And they're impacted by systems of discrimination like racism and sexism and heterosexism. And, so this is kind of just a conceptual diagram that I just kind of want to throw out there that kind of at the top of our kind of beauty hierarchy that really posits white femininity as the social norm that we're explicitly or implicitly conditioned to kind of strive towards is white supremacy, patriarchy, colonialism. And these kind of then lead to sexism, racism, classism that affect all of us, right? And these norms are codified through our policies in the workplace, in schools that don't allow certain type of hairstyles, targeted advertising that make people who are outside of the norm feel self-conscious, even cultural norms around family and friends, which can lead to internalized, notions of beauty and impact our everyday beauty rituals. So let's see. And we call that the environmental justice of beauty. And recently we've just added another layer to this, and that is one of intersectionality. because I think a lot of people that have come to this conversation know that, many people don't just carry one identity, right? So they're not just a person of color, or they're just not just part of the LGBTQIA community, right? But often that they're holding multiple identities. And from historically oppressed groups, and so it's trying to bring this we're trying to bring this layer into kind of the beauty and chemical and health space. And my lab has started to actually do research on trans men, and we are collecting more information on sexual and gender minorities. But I would say there are way more questions to answer than there are data right now. And I just want to end by giving a little example of some of the work we're doing with We Act on their Beauty Inside Out campaign. So one kind of part of environmental and justice of beauty that we are collectively working on is around hair, hair texture preferences, hair product use, especially among people of color. So just to kind of play out how this all kind of rolls out. So racism, sexism, classism intersect in Black hair discrimination, which penalizes Black people for wearing their hair in natural styles. Black hair discrimination often operates in the workplace. Some employers discourage or even prohibit natural hairstyles. And this form of intersectional discrimination, it can negatively impact professional opportunities for people in the Black community, and consequently their long-term health. And to comply with these racialized beauty norms, Black women and others may feel pressure to straighten their hair using beauty products that we know contain harmful endocrine disrupting chemicals like phthalates and parabens, which can impact reproductive health. And indeed, hair relaxer use is associated with increased risk of fibroids and breast cancer among Black women. And so this is just a little bit of data that I did want to share from the Beauty Inside Out campaign. That, this is in collaboration with Lubna, who's no longer at We Act, Taylor, many others at We Act, where they've done community-based sampling in Northern Manhattan. And in addition to getting data on what people are using, we collected really informative data on people's perceptions of beauty and the societal benefits of straight hair. And one dimension of this that often gets, I think, left out is intersections with class and economic opportunity being one of those drivers. And just the thing I wanted to point out on both of these graphs, when asked, about the benefits of straight hair, the thing that stood out most, it's not necessarily about social standing or more likely to find a partner, or that it's linked to, being more beautiful. The thing that really stands out is that access to academic and professional opportunities, so that, certain, people are using certain products because it really does become this gateway to economic mobility. So just some things to think about. And I'm going to end there and, look forward to engaging in conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that really is really helpful when we think about the landscape and sort of the territory that we are sort of wading into in this discussion. So thank you so much for that. And I'm sure we have many more questions and things to add. One thing I wanted to hear about from King Ivy. I know that you work in as a makeup artist during the day. You are someone who does drag, right? When did you first get started in using makeup products? Sort of, what's your story around makeup?
So I started very young. I come from a really big family. I have 9 sisters, and they all used to dress me up as a child growing up. So I remember I was like 7 years old practicing my lip liner. I didn't start till I was 14 years old. I started doing makeup on other people and the girls in high school and stuff. And then I started working in professionally when I was 18.
And I would love to hear more, more. I'll come back to you for this question, but thinking about the gender binary, when we think about different products, they're marketed for men and for women, right? But what we find out is that there's a really big non-binary space where people are just using whatever feels comfortable. So would love to hear from you as well how the gender binary has impacted how you buy and use makeup products, even as a makeup artist, not even as a consumer, right?
Mm-hmm.
How has the gender binary impacted the
Oh,
way that
you're asking me now.
Yes, please.
Sorry. um, so mostly I support people who support my community. That was like the biggest factor I have with when it comes to supporting brands. But it's also like I'm very careful with like what I'm using on skin naturally. Whether like, it doesn't necessarily have to be about gender. Um, it's just like I gravitate more natural products before I use anything that I'll buy in the store because I don't want them to break out with anything. Like there's like tons of moisturizers that you could buy at like CVS and like it'll cause hives and stuff like that. So you already know there's like an ingredient that, and I don't need like sometimes I'm working on set and you have to be in front of camera, so I don't need them to break out with anything right before it happens. Even sometimes where I'm using products and they're like, okay, this kind of stings, and it's just because it's not for their skin. That doesn't mean the product is bad. But because of those reasons, I'll substitute with like olive oil, vitamin C. Like I'll just find like different serums that are geared towards more clean brands. Like just in general with those kind of things.
Great. Thank you so much. And I think, with everyone, our the way that we use products is different. Even thinking about like the cultural context behind, how we use products and how certain products are used in our families over time and friends use different products over time and all that good stuff. I would love to hear more, Roqué, from you about your journey around makeup products, even personal care products. And adding on to this question, how has the gender binary impacted the way that you use makeup? If it has at all, would love to hear more from you.
Of course. First, thank you, Taylor, for having me. And second, my makeup journey started. I'm not like Ivy. I didn't have my mom is not as glamorous. She never really messed with makeup or nothing. But I learned just watching like Top Model and being like, oh, I want to be a top model girl. So let me put this here, let me put this here. So that was how my makeup journey started. And then eventually I found myself in drag, and that was a whole different situation. I was using the most cheap products because, when you start off, you don't really have the funds to like get the NARS and the high end brands that you would think don't have these toxic products in them. So that's how my journey started. Luckily now I like to think that I'm using brands that don't have these toxic products in them, but I'm sure I'll be learning today if they do or they don't. And the binary to me, I think more affects me in buying just like products that like personal products other than makeup products, if anything. Like when you see things marketed for men or marketed for women, and I'm just like, can we just use the same products? It's like, what is the difference? I don't really get it. So there I see that binary. Like I'm like, no, I'm just gonna buy whatever I want to use. I'm gonna go get Nair, and maybe I'll go get a deodorant that's marketed for men. Work. That's how I feel. Like that's how it impacted me in a way. It's like you stop and think about it, and you think, my God, why is there things marketed towards different genders when it's basically the same product? So that's just my thing with the binary and products.
Thank you.
Of
No, I
course.
think that. No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying thank you. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, no, I think that makes total sense. As someone who, for example, was raised as a young girl to be more masculine of center now, right? Even the products that I use have sort of shifted and changed And in some ways they haven't, right? And it's so interesting to think about how marketing fits into the way that we use products, the ways that we buy products. And I'm glad that you brought up the financial piece as well, right? Because that's a real reality.
It honestly, like I go to the beauty supply sometimes and I'm like, yeah, this product is cheaper and maybe I'll do a good job, but like, is the quality as good? Maybe not. But it's what we can afford at this moment in time, so let's just grab it. And I just think about like those poor girls are just like here putting like the cheapest things because we just have to get to the gig, and sometimes it's just that.
Absolutely. Jahlove, I'm super excited to hear from you. Jahlove and I were on a panel previously, so we have the slightest bit of history. We've spoken before. Something that we did speak about, I wanted to first of all hear about your own journey through makeup products, your own journey through makeup products and the gender binary. And then I'm going to ask you another question about the decision-making process. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about you from your makeup journey and the way that you purchase and choose items.
Yes, thank you, Taylor, for having me. And shout out to my panelists and everyone for joining us today. So if you are curious to see how Jahlove look at Jalisa, this is, oh wait, my light's blinding it. Wait, can you see? There we go, there she goes. So my journey with makeup and just products, first was watching my mom. If you are a New Yorker, then you know that Avon was a thing. My mom was an Avon lady, okay? Down to the lotions, perfumes, deodorants, makeup. My mom loved Avon, so I loved Avon naturally because my mom loved it. And when my mom was away, I always was in her makeup, in her shoes, in her clothes. And funny thing, when I showed my mom me in drag for the first time, she was like, "Why do you look like me?" I was like, "Yes, just a younger, prettier version." And I got my sense of fashion and everything from my mom, down to her love of thigh-high boots. I love thigh-high boots. That's like one of my signatures. And then seeing RuPaul and seeing like a cisgender man like transform into this glamazon, I was just like, what? My mind was blown. And I've always gravitated naturally to just feminine things and just nice clothing and just things that smell good. Just what my sisters had, I always wanted. As growing up, there's this stigmatization as being a cisgender Black man that's feminine. So no, let's not let that happen. And so as I started becoming more into myself, these are things that I was accepted in my household, but then that my family started not accepting me. And it became this whole thing, and I just started using it as a rebellious thing. But I can remember going into stores and looking at makeup products and making sure I had like my sister or a female with me, because I just didn't want people looking at me like, why is he buying makeup or this, that, before? Or even going into clothing stores and wanting to buy a shirt from the women's department and just making sure I had somebody with me. But then when I broke out of that, I was just like, first of all, a sheer shirt in a men's department will cost you 10 times more than a woman's department. And I was like, this is just gonna save me some money here. I'm gonna buy this sheer shirt just in an extra large and let's call it a day. And then getting into my own gender expression and just understanding androgyny and the binary versus the non-binary, I was just like, everything just started making much more sense to me. And I also feel for those young people coming up, just trying to navigate the world where some of the product or the imaging don't really match their gender expression. And so I know that it's tough. I know that things are changing slowly, progression-wise, but we can definitely do more to educate ourselves and the community.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I feel like a thread of that this conversation so far has really been around like the way that you learn how to use personal care products, or like where you sort of learn that from. And I would be interested to hear from you, Dr. Zota, if there are any, even in like the research that exists, or if you have any thoughts on like how the ways that we learn how to use makeup products, how we learn how to buy makeup products, how that influences what we choose to purchase.
Yeah, I mean, I think we often ask people, are there certain ingredients that they seek to avoid? And I think more and more we're finding that some of this stuff is kind of getting into public consciousness, about like what ingredients to avoid. I think I think family and peers are a huge source. And for a lot of people, right, like what happens when they're young has such a big impact. But then I think there's also like a coming of age, right? And then what you use as an adult can be really, really different to what you were exposed to as a kid, right? And what was the other part of the question? I kind of forgot.
No, just thinking about how we choose products and how the way that we're raised influences, or the way that we grow up or the way that we experience life as a young person can really influence how we choose to buy different products or even the way that we experience products.
Yeah, and I think now with social media, right? It's such a big, big thing, and beauty influencers, and right. And so I think that's really, really changing the landscape in all kinds of ways. And I mean, a question I had is for the other panelists is are there any companies that are especially making products for the non-binary community? Like personal care products and beauty products. Have you come across that?
I think I haven't seen, and not to say that there isn't, I haven't seen more so the cosmetics line, but I definitely in clothing and fashion, I've seen more representation of non-binary. I think that when I've have seen beauty campaigns, they go from the most extreme, right? So they tend not to find the people in the middle, right? So they'll be from cisgender, and then you'll see drag, or you'll see a woman or a man of trans experience, and then there's like a faint of a non-binary person, but it's always just those faint hints. But and it's not really centered around people identity. It's more just like, oh, now you can purchase these products. Very that.
I do want to say, I want to piggyback off of that because I definitely agree. I feel like it became more binary inclusive within the cosmetic world because now they include more opposite genders and stuff in their makeup campaigns. Like I know Becca Cosmetics has done it. I know Tarte has done it. Too Faced has done it. Marc Jacobs has done it. But it's because of that I'm grateful to see. I feel like sometimes I'm more privileged because when you see it in other countries and stuff, it's like they don't have this freedom that we get. We have Patrick Starr coming out with his own makeup line. We have Jeffree Star coming. Well, he's had his makeup line, and then it highlights and shows more of the drag side, the non-binary side. I know even Huda Beauty, like a few years ago, they had like Shea Coulee and Violet Chachki. So I don't know if it's like necessarily geared, if it's ever going to necessarily be geared towards just non-binary, because at the end of the day, it's a company. They want to make their money.
Absolutely. And I think this really back to that piece that I was going to bring back to Jahlove around. We had a conversation around what it means to have like folks from the queer community, folks who do drag, who use a lot of makeup regularly at the decision-making tables. I would love to hear more from everyone about what a difference that could make. Even thinking about yourselves, if you were at a decision-making table at some of these rooms, right? What things might you consider?
I think definitely there needs to be people of color. When we talk about diversity, I think that people just really think of a race issue. Diversity means gender, sexual orientation, race, abilities, people disabled, everybody needs to be in the room. So it's not supposed to be a race thing. And I think that it's important for, especially Black people, to be at these decision-making tables because of just how sensitive our skins are, and just what what we like, right? We love gravitating towards nice, beautiful things. That's just on period. And I have a friend right now that's been trying to launch a men makeup line for years, and it's not getting as much traction. The cosmetic community is still biased towards men wearing makeup, or even just a specific makeup line for men. And so I think it's important for us to be at the decision-making table. And then also when it comes into the science and the data and the research on how it's going to impact our community, just not our health, but also, well, just not financially, but also our health. So when you have people like me, and it doesn't have to be me, but just people that look like me, that represents me at the decision-making table, makes me feel better when I go in purchasing a product and knowing that history is there when I look at the product.
Thank you.
I can add to that. So I really appreciate what Jahlove said, and I totally agree with it. And just from the science kind of side, and you know, you're totally right? Like, so no one is looking at how these issues, you know, are playing out in the non-binary community, in the trans community, and it's partly because we don't have that diversity in our scientific community, right? And so especially kind of the higher up you go, the less diverse it becomes. And so, you know, Peggy mentioned how Agents of Change in Environmental Justice is a co-sponsor. And so it's a program I started, and it's to not just increase diversity for the sake of diversity in policy and in science, but it's about helping, you know, these kind of emerging leaders, all of whom are, you know, from historically excluded backgrounds, right? And so I think language here matters too. I don't like to say underrepresented. They're underrepresented for a reason, right? There's been historical exclusion on race, sexual orientation, gender, you know, disability, so many different axes, right? And so, and sometimes multiple axes, right? And it's about kind of helping them, you know, they're these very smart, bright people with scientific or other expertise, but helping them both cultivate that voice and their ideas to center, for example, queer populations, and giving them the platform to do that, right? And helping them kind of rise with that authentic voice, right? Because we don't want diversity just to have a brown body around in a board, right? We want that person to bring their own unique voice and ideas, right? That's what we want, right? So I think that's what we mean by inclusion, right, and equity. And so that's kind of what our program is kind of doing, because you're completely right that often we're not asking a lot of these scientific questions because of the people who are asking the questions.
Yeah, appreciate it. There's some comments, Taylor, in the chat that Christopher had pointed out.
Yeah, I'm absolutely going to get to Christopher in just a second. I know that Peggy wanted to hop in and add to the conversation.
Yeah, I wanted to just comment on a couple of things that I heard our guest panelists mention. And it just made me think of the concept that the cost of a product does not indicate that it's a safer product. Sometimes it might indicate that the powder is finer, or the color is, you know, better for you, or, you know, whatever those kind of makeup qualities are, but it doesn't mean it's safer. So I wanted to get that point across. Also, I heard someone say, well, I think it might have been King Ivy, that I usually use, you know, natural products. And I think some of the natural ingredients that you mentioned are great, but sometimes when we see the label natural on a product, does not mean what you think it may mean. And so we need to be clear what natural is, what organic is, because those terms are used just sort of willy-nilly, you know. After a while, you don't know what they mean. And so I think we have to be very specific. And then I guess the last question I would want to know is is it knowing this information and maybe talking to your friends about it, does it really make you consider tomorrow changing your brand or considering a different product? So I just wanted to put that challenge out.
I would say yes. But the unfortunate side about a lot of these things is that we can read, we can hear so much about products, but sometimes it is actually through personal experience, whether how we navigate through shopping for products, right? I know that I have been consciously purchasing Black-owned businesses because I want to circulate dollars within Black and brown businesses. Now, I will say that one makeup line that I will not name that is Black-owned, when I started using their palette, really gave me some irritation around the eyes, and I just had to stop using that product. So I have been doing my research and educating and changing, but it is a natural, slow progression. But yes, I am being very cognizant about what I'm using. I'm not saying I look at every labeling and this, that, the fourth, because I do like word of mouth, but for the most part, I've been changing my habits.
Thank you. One of the last questions that I wanted to, King Ivy, you gonna pop in?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Peggy. Thank you. Thank you for pointing that out. I think I should have been more mindful with my language there. But like you said, I named the ingredients and not the products because I usually go after the ingredients before the product. So like if I know I need something that's more brightening, I'm gonna use something like turmeric. I'm gonna use something like vitamin C, so like lemon peels or orange peels or anything like that, or like even cut a piece of lemon, get it on there. I'm gonna use, if I know I want to be more moisturized and more glowy, before I put my makeup on, I'm gonna prep it with olive oil. I'm gonna use coconut oil. I'm gonna do what I have to do to get in and make sure I look as good as I can. Because I do realize like sometimes we don't always look at the labels of the makeup and the ingredients. Like I was doing makeup for so long and I just recently found out that they use bugs for red lipstick. Like they use the blood of the bugs for red lipstick. So like just hearing about that, you know what I mean? Like every day we're always learning something new.
That's it.
My love, I had never heard that before. I did not know that. Oh my goodness. Like Jahlove said, to me, it's like with makeup products, we're so used to like having word of mouth. So it's like, oh, we don't really go out of our way to try something new unless we know somebody else has done it. And we're like, oh yeah, it looks good on them, so we're gonna try it on. So to me, yes, I wanna find a product that like I could be like the girl to be like, yeah, go do this. Go wear this because this is good. But because there's like no products like that out there, none of us really have gone out of our way to like look for it. We've always just been like, oh, looks flawless on you, darling. We're gonna put this on my face now. It's never been, oh, there's this product. Let's just all go get it.
So would you be happy with like a list of things you should think about or a website that says these are the things in this product and maybe you should avoid it? Would you kind of look at that kind of website?
Personally, I would say yes. I would happily look into that.
Great.
I'd say yes.
Can I ask one more follow-up? So it makes sense that word of mouth, right? For most people, that's the way you hear about stuff. Like in kind of the conversations, I'm sure just like its use and how effective it is probably the biggest thing. But do folks talk about the kind of the chemical side of it and whether it's clean or, I mean, does that come up kind of in these word of mouth kind of recommendations?
I would say, as a dark-skinned person talking to other dark-skinned queens, most of the conversation is like, what is going to be highly pigmented? What is going to show up for us on stage? What's not going to make us run? What's going to, help mattify some of our oily skin? Those are some of the conversations. I think the highest thing that I know that I've had conversations like what activate our allergies, and it's some of those pressing powders. And so those are like the conversations that I've been having circulating around me.
So I'll be honest, when it comes to makeup, I might not be like too informative on the brandings of it, but if you like talk to me about skincare and I'm like, I'm helping you out with some skincare, I'm like naming some things for you to use, I will get into it. I will show you like where the probiotics are, what's the more natural product to use that's going to actually help and target your skin, or even if you could just make it at home, I'm gonna be like, girl, just make it at home. Like it's, some things are better if you made it at home too. So I know I keep saying that. I'm gonna stop saying that after a while, but it's kind of true. It's like when you figure out the hacks and they work and you get to actually see what's in it, you just like, girl, you kind of just stick to it.
Yeah, I have to completely agree. I don't think we really talk about the chemical side of things. We talk more about, oh, is this gonna show up on stage? Oh, how glimmery is this? We never really have the conversation of, oh, this is in this. Girl, watch out. We don't really have those conversations.
Thank you so much. I know we have a couple of minutes left, but there is one question that I wanted to ask here, giving us some perspective for folks who maybe never done drag before, who maybe gone to a show once or twice. Thinking about exposure is really important, right? Whether or not you are putting on makeup once to go out every now and then versus I'm putting it on for a show and I'm doing a show every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, whatever day, right? What is a day in your life sort of like as far as makeup usage and product usage? How long does it take to put on makeup?
So it depends on the day and the event. Okay. It depends on where I'm going and where I'm gonna be at. Just the other day, I was like doing a bachelorette party and we was gonna be outside, the sun was beaming. I'm telling all the girls, no creams or liquids today, ladies. You better find another way to cover up that 5 o'clock shadow, because you sit out in the sun with creams and liquid, you're gonna look like a melted ice cream, like a hot mess. Not even like a good type of melted ice cream. And then like, so nobody wanted to listen to me, of course, because you know, they don't, it's like you tell them, like how you tell a child, don't touch the fire, and they still go and touch the fire. And so I literally just use powder and everything. And that's usually what I do when I'm outside in the heat, in the sun, everything's powder. And literally my face was the only face that was like on the entire day and it did not move. Now, when I'm on stage and the lighting and stuff, I'm using creams, liquids, all of that. That's gonna take me about like 2.5 hours, because that's like, you're doing like you're like basically doing the cream part of your face, blending all of that in, and then you're setting all of that and putting powder right over it. So you're like kind of painting like 2 mugs at the same time, if that makes sense. I don't know. Does it make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah.
So baby.
So it's gonna take longer, but like if I'm just doing powder and I'm gonna be outside, like but maybe that's just me. I could be done within an hour.
Yeah. For me, it just like Ivy said, it depends on the gig. Some days it could be hours, some days it could be 2 hours. If I have to be there by a certain time, it may just have to be a half an hour and call it a smoky eye. That's easy makeup thing to do. But I think that, yeah, did I answer the question? Yeah, but.
Yeah, you did.
Okay.
For
Okay.
me, girls are gonna laugh at me. It takes me like a good 3 hours to do this. It does, because like Ivy said, it really is one phase, you set it completely, then you throw on another phase. It's like layers on layers on layers on layers. It's never ending. And then, you have to do your final touches. Then you have to throw sprays on your face. You have to let that dry. You have to run around putting on outfits. So a day in the life of a drag queen, let me tell you something. It does not start when we get to the gig. There's hours before that go into that. I'm just letting it be known. It takes hours.
It's also like, for me personally, my skin prep takes longer than my actual makeup, because I'm over here shaving and, like, believe it or not, I'm actually a man. And I have a really thick beard because, you know, I'm Latin. So like my hair just grows really thick. So having to shave and then like covering the brows, gluing them down, you know, kind of like taking a chainsaw and just like carving your face in, that part takes the longest. And then the makeup part. The makeup actually is just the shortest part for me.
Right. Thank you so much. Listen, I speaking from my own experience, I wouldn't have known unless we asked, but I feel like, you know, even having this discussion is a realization that there's so many people who are missed out around these personal care product discussions, toxic product discussions, you know, even thinking about, you know, if you are, you know, identifying on the spectrum of gender, the different ways that you use products, right, are going to impact our bodies differently. And there's so much research and discussion to be had. I know that we have a couple minutes left, and I tried to incorporate some of the questions that we had pre-submitted into this discussion. But I have, well, actually, my colleague Chris has dropped in links to all of the social media information for our panelists, ways you can get in contact with them, and has also dropped in our Beauty Inside Out campaign link as well. There's more coming on the Beauty Inside Out front. And what we will do for the report back is also include a couple of really great resources if you want to learn more about toxic products, if you want to learn more about the databases that can tell you a little bit more about the products that you're using, that you'll have a good start, I promise. We're also hosting a membership barbecue on Saturday, July 10th. The information is in the chat. Thank you so much for our panelists who were here for this conversation. We really, really, really appreciate all of you. Chris is dropping the link to membership as well. He's dropping all the links in the chat. Happy Pride, and we hope to see you at another We Act event or at another drag event soon.
Hi, Lubna.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. Have a great night.
Buenas noches, mi amores.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi.